All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're so glad you've joined us for what should be a fascinating discussion on next generation workforce certifications, innovative tools for educating and upskilling supply chain automation technicians. My name is Ron Baddock, and I'm with Amtek Company. I'm joined today by a phenomenal group of panelists from organizations that are leading the way for certification and training in supply chain automation. The panelists represent three organizations: the National Center for Supply Chain Automation, the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council, and Amatrol. Before we introduce our panel, I'd like to go over some logistics for today's webinar. First, we are recording the session, and everyone registered will receive a follow-up email with the link to the recording. We do encourage you to share this recording with your colleagues. We are also taking audience questions today, which we will collect and pose to our panelists during a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Please use the Q&A button on your Zoom control panel to submit questions anytime throughout the presentation. We expect there will be many questions, and if we don't directly address your question during the Q&A session, we will be sure to follow up with you directly this week. Now, I would like to introduce you to our moderator for today's presentation, Rich Sykes from Amtek Company.
Thank you, Ron. And on behalf of everyone here at Amtek, as well as the panelists, thank you all for joining the webinar today. Got a great discussion coming up related to next generation workforce certification. We're going to be talking about tools for educating and upskilling the workers in this very important supply chain automation field. So let's jump right in if we can. Most of you that are here in the Mid-Atlantic area probably have heard of Trade Point Atlantic. Trade Point Atlantic is a site where the old Sparrows Point steel plant used to be. It's home to a number of distribution warehouses, places such as FedEx, Under Armour, Amazon has a facility or two out there. McCormick Spice, I saw just announced a building out there as well. In spite of what's happening with the pandemic, these places are seeing phenomenal growth year to year. If you listen to Aaron Tamarchio, who's the VP out there, they've already added over 8,000 jobs. The estimate is somewhere in the ballpark of 20,000 jobs when all is said and done and the site is finished and complete. And of course, the industry experts expect that the pandemic is going to intensify the need for the distribution centers just because of the increased demand. As you all know, in the state of Maryland and other states here in the Mid-Atlantic, they are starting to do more lockdowns. So the anticipation is that folks will, instead of going to the mall, instead of going to the store, they'll spend a good bit of their holiday shopping sitting on the sofa in their living room. So what does that mean for us? Well, in the Mid-Atlantic, we are a hotbed for this stuff. We have a number of interstates that run through our territory, Interstate 95 and 70 and 81 and so forth. Substantial seaports in cities such as Norfolk and Baltimore, railways, and of course we've got major airfare air hubs in all of these cities as well. So we're ideally located to handle these things. And of course, you've all read in the news recently, there have been a number of places that have been built just very recently, and the new ones announced all over the states of Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, West Virginia. If you pay any attention to the headlines back in September, in spite of the pandemic, Amazon announced hiring of 100,000 additional employees to keep up with the demand, which happened to be their fourth hiring spree for the year. And I think we have a couple folks joining the call today from out in Western Maryland. Of course, Amazon just announced a couple of weeks ago that they're going to have a new fulfillment center out in the Hagerstown area, which is great. So the need is there, and of course globally before COVID, it was estimated that e-commerce would reach somewhere in the ballpark of $5 trillion by 2021. And more and more people again are shopping from their homes rather than going to the mall and to grocery stores and so forth. They're ordering these things on Amazon and places like that. So the net result is it's really taxed the current supply chain infrastructure. So the organizations are looking to do things like build automation into these plants so that they can improve their capacity. And the net result is that it's really challenging for these companies because of the shortage of skilled workforce, folks that can come in and understand how to work in the world of automation. And so that's why we're here today. The session on educating, upskilling supply chain automation technicians it's a timely discussion. It's important. And so let's go ahead and get started. Joining us today will be a number of highly respected industry professionals, beginning with Mr. Steve Harrington, who's the industry liaison for the National Center for Supply Chain Automation. In his role, he's responsible for development and oversight of a national industry leadership team consisting of supply chain executives, logistics industry stakeholders, and so forth. Steve brings to our discussion 28 years of experience in supply chain operations. Steve, welcome, and thanks for joining on the call today.
Thank you so much, Rich. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Following Steve, you'll hear from Mr. Neil Reddy. Mr. Reddy is the co-founder of the Manufacturing Skill Standards Council. Most of you folks that know Neil recognize MSSC because they do a lot of certifications. MSSC is an industry-led nonprofit training, assessment, and certification organization. They focus on core technical competencies needed by nation's frontline production and material handling workers. Today, Mr. Reddy oversees all aspects of MSSC, from operations and all the way to their marketing. And as most of you know, or many of you probably know, Amtek is the exclusive distributor for MSSC in the Mid-Atlantic region. Neil, again, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Rich. I really appreciate being here.
Welcome. And then finally, following Mr. Reddy, we'll be joined by Mr. Paul Perkins. Oh, sorry, I advanced the slide there. Sorry, guys. We'll be joined by Mr. Paul Perkins. Mr. Perkins is the co-founder, president, and CEO of Amatrol, located in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Amatrol develops and manufactures a wide range of technical learning systems and online learning materials for teaching skills that prepare individuals for employment in industries such as supply chain automation, as well as other areas such as manufacturing, energy, and so forth. Amatrol products are used by thousands of colleges, industrial training centers, and high schools throughout all 50 states and over 53 foreign countries. As well as with MSSC, Amtek is the proud exclusive distributor of Amatrol in the Mid-Atlantic region. Paul, thank you for joining the call and welcome.
Thank you, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Now that we met the panelists, we're going to get started by handing the meeting off to Mr. Steve Harrington from the National Center for Supply Chain Automation. Steve, it's yours.
Thank you. In 2011, two academics were seeking National Science Foundation funding for a growing occupation that was emerging in the modern 21st century warehouse that they termed a supply chain technician. This emerging technician occupation, with a distinct career pathway, was occurring at the intersection of traditional industrial mechanics with motor controls and information technology. The demand for these well-paid, multi-skilled technicians was growing exponentially, and no one outside the industry knew it. Hands-on educational training programs contextualized to meet this growing demand were non-existent. And the two academics I referenced earlier convinced an NSF program officer to come to California to see some of these automated facilities in operation. He agreed to come and was taken on tours of a fully automated Skechers building and a highly automated Cardinal Healthcare operation. Like most people, the program officer had no idea automated systems like these were in use in today's technically advanced logistics environment, and he was amazed. He could see why these highly automated systems required skilled technicians to keep them operational. As a result, NSF funding for the National Center for Supply Chain Automation was approved. This slide illustrates examples of the automated systems that exist in today's modern warehouse. It should help provide some context for today's webinar. So I mentioned that the center was funded. The National Center was funded under NSF Advanced Technological Education Program, which is focused on technician education in emerging occupations in STEM discipline fields. with defined career pathways that pay living wages for entry-level positions. The focus of our work is on the occupation of supply chain technician, which is also referenced as a supply chain automation technician, a multi-craft technician, or simply a technician in today's modern 21st century logistics center. The center works with industry to develop resources in support of this occupation, which are available for use by educators. Everything the center develops is with the input, guidance, and vetting by members of our industry leadership team. Some of those resources include occupational profiles, a model program, course outlines, educational videos, white papers, and our introduction to the automated warehouse e-textbook I will be talking about in a few minutes. As a result of our grant funding, all of our resources are available at no cost to users and are available for download on our website. The center does not engage in student education. This is handled by our educational collaborators at numerous community colleges and technical schools across the country. The mission and objectives of the center are quite simple. At the core is to increase the supply of highly qualified supply chain automation technicians. And the focus of today's webinar for us is on objective number 4 on the far right-hand side of this particular slide, which is to establish and promote stackable national industry certifications in supply chain automation. We have industry partners, we have academic partners in various states across the country. The center is housed at Norco College in Southern California, and we have partners in Ohio, Illinois, and Central Piedmont Community College in Charlotte, North Carolina. I mentioned earlier that the industry advises the center on everything the center does. This slide represents logos from companies that have been involved in advising us from the very onset of the center formation. Over time, the number of firms has evolved and the nature of those firms has evolved. We currently have 41 industry leadership team members from 29 firms. Another core element of the center's focus is on the occupation that industry helped define at the onset. A person who installs, maintains, supports, operates, or upgrades the automated material handling equipment and systems which support the supply chain. Everything that we do has to be centered and focused around this particular definition as part of the scope of work with our NSF funding. And you see the variety of skills and knowledge that an individual who's a technician of this type needs to have. It's quite varied, and as I mentioned earlier, it was one of our industry partners calls this a multi-craft technician, which is quite an interesting descriptor of what this individual does. One of the NSF requirements is that in terms of their investment in technician occupations in varying fields, is that there's a career pathway that both the occupation itself pays living wages at the start that can support an individual and or a family, and that there's a career pathway that grows over time and also, of course, that grows exponentially in terms of wages. And this is a great illustration from one of our industry partners of the technician beginning point, midpoint, and where somebody can grow into some leadership positions at the high end. The beginning point ranges in wages from $18 to $22 an hour, or around $40,000 a year for beginning technicians. More multi-skilled technicians over time, like a level 3 or a level 4 tech, makes somewhere in the $65,000 to $80,000 a year range. And then those other positions, as you move up, continue to grow. And at the high end, those other positions pay, the manager positions pay in excess of 6 figures. The center was involved in the development of an e-textbook with 6 of our industry leadership team members. The introduction to the automated warehouse e-textbook is designed as a survey course for high schools and community colleges to provide career awareness knowledge for students that are interested in fields in the supply chain. The first step is making people aware of the supply chain. A lot of the people prior to COVID hadn't even heard of the word supply chain, but obviously obviously supply chain is in the national dialogue all of the time. At any rate, the ebook is available, or iBook, the book is available via iBook and PDF download on the National Center's website. It has interactive widgets and an instructor's manual to support that. At the conclusion of today's webinar, you'll be receiving a link to the e-textbook if that's something you're interested in looking at. Earlier, Rich talked about the global growth of e-commerce, about 40% year over year to a number of about $5 trillion. This particular slide helps quantify that in terms of number of packages. One thing that's important to note, traditional logistics were always done one case at a time, a full carton at a time, or a full pallet at a time. The change in the evolution in the logistics world as a result of e-commerce is that e-commerce packages are shipped one each at a time, which involves a higher level of complexity in the logistics world. And in order to support that from an efficient perspective, firms engaged in e-commerce are having to more and more adopt automated equipment and systems in order to meet the growing customer need. The standard was set by Amazon a couple of years ago with 2-day shipping, which has moved to 1-day shipping and even two-hour shipping. And that's challenged, of course, retailers all across the country. This e-commerce growth internationally is forecasted to double by 2026. And that represents an additional 103 billion new handling opportunities or new package handling opportunities for logistics firms. All of this information shows the growth of automated equipment and systems in today's modern warehouse. And of course, the demand for technicians to keep those complex systems operational. So the prior slide showed international data. This is domestic data from the United States over the past 10 years. This is pre-COVID. If you look on the far right, you see that in the year 2019, about 11% of all US retail goods in the US were sold via e-commerce. So it's been growing year over year for quite some period of time, actually dating back to all the way to 1999 in the year 2000. The growth that was occurring, that was forecasted to occur between 2019 and 2020 was about 2% growth, or about $85 billion. Now, it's big numbers and all that. A simple way to quantify that was that there was a movement for about 1 out of every 9 things that people purchased to be handled via e-commerce to a move to about 1 out of every 8. So keep that in mind as you move toward this slide, which shows the most recent data out of the US Department of Commerce, which shows that growth occurred not at 13% of total US retail sales, but at 16%. So that movement was from 1 in 9 packages to nearly 1 in 6 items that consumers buy today are via e-commerce. And as a result of COVID, about 40% of the people that were involved in e-commerce purchases back in March and April, were using e-commerce for the first time. And most recent data is showing that 3 out of 4 people have tried new avenues of shopping using e-commerce since the onset of COVID. Statistically, UBS, an international financial services firm, is now forecasting that 25% of all US retail spending will be online by 2025. The implication is quite astounding for the bricks and mortar world, where it's anticipated that an additional 100,000 physical stores will close in the US between now and 2025. That's obviously very significant. And looking at 20,000 US stores closing annually, that is a significant movement of traditional employment from bricks and mortar retail, think of store clerks, stock clerks, cashiers, into today's logistics environment. And you see those growth statistics, that some of them regional in nature, that Rich had shared earlier. This is occurring, it's occurring all over the country. And as a result of this and the accelerated demand for e-commerce shipments, during the month of September alone, Amazon added 100 facilities to its US operations in the month of September. That's across the board of all types of centers that they do have, but that is quite noteworthy in and of itself. Another impact of this shift toward this growth that occurred in the second quarter of this year is what it's done to the package handling industry. Think of UPS, FedEx, USPS, and Amazon themselves, and all of the other mid and small size firms who handle these sorts of packages and make these deliveries. The bottom line is that the total US capacity for package handling is around, at this point in time, is around 79 million packages, and there's a daily demand for 86 million packages. So what industries had to do to respond to this change is, of course, add shifts, work Sundays, work overtime, add people, and of course, add technicians to keep these automated systems operational. Going forward, these package handling firms are going to need to add facilities, but it's obviously not something you can immediately do. But the planning's underway for that. And all of these facilities require technicians to keep them operational. So CB Richard Ellis came up with a metric back in 2016 that said that for every $1 billion in e-commerce sales, there is an addition of 1.25 million square feet of distribution space. So that would be the pivot from bricks and mortar stores closing to the build out of logistics facilities. So the original number was about $85 billion growth in e-commerce. That was prior forecast. Now it's in excess of $200 billion. And so you translate that, there's a need right now at this time for an additional 250 million square feet of space in the US, logistics space in the US. And so the growth is occurring there. And that also is driving the growth of the demand for technicians, accelerating need for those technicians. The National Center's role in research at the onset was to identify, to see if, as part of our research, was to look for gaps in certifications. Was there a certification program that was industry validated and nationally portable, and in this case, ISO accredited, that existed for technicians that did this sort of work? And the answer to that question was no. As a result of that and involvement with early stakeholders in the center formation, an MOU was entered into between the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council and MHI, the Material Handling Industry of America. All of their members are the equipment manufacturers who make automated equipment and systems, so have about 750 members. So the center's role in the certification development was on the research side. And we convened a number of industry groups, industry focus groups, to tease out the skill set that these technicians do in today's logistics environment. We'd convened folks from large retailers, from package handling firms, and from, of course, the automated equipment suppliers themselves. And we packaged all of that information up, and then we forwarded it on to the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council for their role in the development of the certification. Along the way, industry leadership team members for the center were also involved in the process of validating the assessments and making sure that the skills standards were accurate and that they were mapped over to the initial research the center did. And the industry leadership team partners also were involved in the development, in providing input into the development of the device that Paul Perkins was speaking about, Skill Boss Logistics device, as well as critiquing and providing commentary on the e-learning that supports the entire program. It was essential to the center and the center's role that the initial research was totally aligned with the certification and the development of the device with the e-learning to support it, so that there's a fully integrated system. And that has been validated, and that does exist in this particular certification program. Going forward, the center's role is to raise awareness about this certification, as well as other certifications in the industrial technology technician space. Going forward, there are a number of certification pilot programs in play at center partner schools, as well as a few collaborators who have done a lot of work with the center itself and sought NSF funding under that umbrella. So there's a list of those schools that are involved in those pilots at this juncture. I'd also like to touch upon the fact that the Target Corporation, that's been involved with the center from the start, has ongoing pilots in play with both educational partners, as well as one particular apprenticeship pilot program that's on site at Target in Southern California, using apprenticeship. And it's a pilot that's underway with some good case study data that will come out kind of mid next year. If you're a educational institution that's considering going after grant funding for a supply chain automation program to enhance your existing industrial technologies program, or going after some grant funding for equipment, the center has industry reports and resources on its website. I would be happy to help direct anybody that might have an interest to where those are located, along with provide commentary about how you might draw relevant industry information out of your local region in order to support any sort of grant application. With that said, here's my contact information, and I'd like to go ahead and turn this webinar over to my friend, Mr. Neil Reddy. Neil, if you could share your screen.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you, your National Center for Supply Chain Automation. Let me just get my presentation up here. Yeah, I'd like to, again, thank the National Center for Supply Chain Automation and Amatrol, our really key partners that really enabled our certified technician supply chain automation training and certification program that we'll be introducing today. So thank you, Steve, again, to you and your group, and Paul and Amatrol, and of course, our friends, Rich and so forth at our training solution provider at Amtek. So thank you again for being on today. So just a little bit about the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council. We're an industry-led nonprofit national certifying body. Again, we're a leader in preparing people to be frontline technicians in advanced manufacturing and logistics. We are nationwide. We have a network of over 2,700 MSSC trained instructors that teach our courseware and our curriculum, and of course other manufacturing and logistics curriculums as well. But we also have close to 1,800 at this point authorized assessment centers where our assessments are delivered to our certificates. We're also endorsed by the National Association of Manufacturers for both manufacturing and logistics. And we're also the only national certifying body accredited under ISO standard 17024 for manufacturing and logistics, or personnel certification. And we have 7 certifications now, including the 3 we'll be launching today. So 2 production technician certifications, 1 logistics technician or material handling certification, 1 forklift technician, which is the only CFT, which is the only automotive sort of forklift repair and service certification in the country. But to our point in our introduction today of the Certified Technician Supply Chain Automation, again, this is the CT-SCA is a person who installs, operates, supports, upgrades, or maintains the automated material handling equipment and systems that support the supply chain. You'll see at the very top here, I've already recognized the great work we've partnered with Amatrol on and the National Center for Supply Chain Automation. Just a quick thank you to material handling industry. They enabled us, they also helped to provide us with subject matter experts to help develop our standards and so forth. And also the Material Handling Equipment Distributors Association, MAHITA, who also helped us in terms of providing subject matter experts and in just increasing our overall recognition and awareness of our program. So again, we talk about a comprehensive system, and for all 7 of our certifications, they all meet these criteria. So we do have, again, we start with standards, industry defined, identified, and validated standards. We then, of course, use those standards to develop assessments and courseware and instructor training to have authorized instructors to teach these courses. And then, of course, we issue credentials to our certificates that meet the cut score in our assessments, our high stakes assessments. And of course, we have to maintain a national registry under our ISO 17024 accreditation of all of our certificates. So getting on here to introduce our 3 certifications. Really, the first credential is equipment maintenance, or SCA EM, CT-SCA EM. And this credential is aligned with the skills most supply chain employers require for, let's say, an entry-level maintenance technician. The bullet lists you see here shown under the title gives examples of the key activities or skills on which individuals are assessed for the certification. This includes skills such as system operation, safety, preventative maintenance, lubrication, in various types of machine adjustments. Now, after the EM, an individual can move on, or a certificate move on to the equipment repair certification, CT-SCA ER. And similar to EM, the ER credential is aligned with the skills required for the next level technician occupation in most supply chain facilities, sometimes called a Tech 2, which is to troubleshoot, install, and modify the electromechanical equipment. Now, that includes working with systems such as hydraulics, pneumatics, AC and DC electric motors, and mechanical power transmission. And the third certification that we have for under CT-SCA is network repair. This is really the capstone credential where our certificates demonstrate the competency of really the entire automation system, adding controllers and networks. Like the other two credentials, the NR credential is aligned with industry requirements for the Tech 3 occupation. In this credential, individuals must demonstrate their ability to install, configure, program, modify, and troubleshoot programmable logic controllers, variable frequency drives, Ethernet networks, barcode scanners, and the entire system. Now, how does an individual earn one of these certifications? What are really kind of the nuts and bolts of the basic requirements? So right now we're piloting this program with some large OEMs, and we figure actually a little bit higher than 150 hours. So we think total training time, probably more like 170 to 200 hours, depending on the student, of course. And that it's neat because it's really project-based learning at its very best. And this is a combination of e-learning and also hands-on training using the SkillBoss logistics device, that also using the Fault Pro software that Paul Perkins will be talking about here shortly. So it's a combination of the learning and then, of course, two assessments. So we have e-learning. We have a multiple choice for the e-learning component, which is 90 to 120 minutes. And then we have a hands-on performance-based assessment using the SkillBoss logistics device here in the picture. Now, that performance-based assessment is really done by a human examiner, in most cases, an authorized instructor. Now, we're very excited about the SkillBoss and the value of SkillBoss devices. So we have one for production, but the one we're introducing today is SkillBoss Logistics. These hands-on trainers are of enormous value to MSSC because we have close to 1,800 assessment centers. So how do you use the same assessment? How do you replicate and give our certificates the same assessment experience? Well, the only way to do that with the numbers of people we're talking about, and with any maintenance of quality and quality assurance, would be to have a machine like SkillBoss Logistics. This also helps to meet our ISO 17024 requirement for consistent testing. Combined with the national certification, this of course increases the interest in the attraction for students in our certificates to go into logistics careers. It also makes training accessible to a much larger number of schools, company training centers, workforce investment boards, military bases, and so forth. Because this is mobile, this is a device that sits on a tabletop, and within a computer lab in this device, you can offer a very valuable learning experience, a well-paying job with any three of these certifications. So with that said, I would like to turn this over to Paul Perkins, who can give you a little bit more in detail on SkillBoss Logistics. Thanks.
Hey, Paul, would you unmute, please?
I did. Thank you, Larry. And thank you, Neil. SkillBoss is the device for assessing the hands-on skills in the CT-SCA certification. So as Neil mentioned, everyone who gets certified must test out on the device to ensure that the assessment is consistent. But SkillBoss also has a second purpose, and that is to serve as a training device. So the development of SkillBoss has been an extensive process. It spanned about 2 years, and I can truly say it's been a team effort. Leadership has come from thank you. So the leadership that helped develop the device came from MHI, in Charlotte, North Carolina. We've had MSSC in Virginia, Mahida in Illinois, Amatrol in Indiana, and of course the National Center in California. And the group not only developed the vision for the device, but they also played a key role in engaging industry experts in its development. And we ultimately assembled a who's who of the supply chain industry with iconic names like some of the ones that you see here. And these companies provided expert advisors to help shape the design of the SkillBoss device, and they spent countless hours reviewing and testing the prototype to validate the skills. The device that resulted from that work is the device that you see here in the lower left corner of the slide, which is a working tabletop size sortation system. And even though it's compact, SkillBoss uses the same technologies and techniques used in large-scale sortation systems, like the system that you see here on the right side of the slide. On SkillBoss, packages are inducted, scanned, routed to multiple conveyors, and then sorted into 3 destination chutes. Or if there's a bad scan, sent to a rework station. And the skills are not only applicable to sortation systems, we also made an extra effort to include a wide range of technologies so the skills learned and assessed apply to other types of supply chain automation. To learn the skills, we've developed 3 online courses which are aligned with the CT-SCA certifications. And as Neil mentioned, the courses are 150 to 200 hours, probably closer to the 200 hours. We're certainly going through our initial testing phases with that. And the goal of these courses is to help prepare people for the hands-on assessments and the work that they're going to do on SkillBoss, but also prepare them for the online tests that they'll take for the CT-SCA exams. And this slide shows some examples of screens from the online courses. As you can see, they're truly multimedia in nature with animations, 3D graphics, voice and text, and they're highly interactive. They're not just page turners. These courses also include virtual simulators so that students can actually do hands-on work, not just on SkillBoss in the lab, but they can also do it offline at home, wherever they happen to be. And we have a variety of simulators that simulate everything from AC/DC electricity to automation with PLCs and pneumatics. And what's really unique about these simulators is that students can make mistakes. They can see the results of that work. And the courses, I think, have a tremendous amount of value in a lot of different ways. They could be integrated into standard courses that are being taught now, but they also are designed so they can be set apart as a rapid response or an accelerated training type format, because the content that's been developed for the 3 courses is designed specifically to meet this certification. And so students can go through these courses in a lot less time than what they might require if they were going through standard maintenance courses being taught in colleges now, which may have a lot of the same content, but they have more than what's needed for the supply chain industry. And so where we see these courses having a really great fit is in workforce development, in-plant training, where the training time needs to be short as possible. As Neil mentioned, there's about 100 hands-on skills that can be done on SkillBoss, and the pieces of the system that are used to perform that involve the 3 main elements. One is a human-machine interface that runs a warehouse control software. You can see some examples of screens in the lower left-hand corner. There's also a control unit. You can see that in the upper left corner of the screen, and then the workstation itself on the right side, which has the control unit mounted to it. And so these elements all come together to actually perform different types of sortation activities where students can do troubleshooting and adjustments and a variety of different skills. So in addition to these elements that you see here, there's another important element to SkillBoss that is designed to teach troubleshooting. And we do that with a computer-based fault insertion system called FaultPro. And on SkillBoss, FaultPro has the ability to insert over 50 faults into the system. You can see examples on the left side of the screen here of some of the types of devices that we're putting faults into it. And SkillBoss or FaultPro consists of an electronic circuit board and software, that operate together. And we think that using a computerized method to insert faults is really useful in a lot of different ways. For one, it's very safe. It doesn't hurt the student or the equipment. And secondly, it's automated. It allows teachers to be able to circulate through the classroom because students can be working on different exercises, doing troubleshooting without having the instructor there to flip a switch or to pull a wire or do some other manual means of putting faults into it. And then lastly, it creates a data record, and that's really useful because people can look at the time that they took and the process they used and analyze it to get better at troubleshooting. So now that I've described a bit about how what SkillBoss has, let's take a look at SkillBoss in action so we can see it working. The SkillBoss workstation is designed to be accessed from all four sides so multiple students can work on it at the same time. We've also designed it for safety with features like guards with safety switches placed over critical moving components. To start the process, the packages are placed on the induction roller conveyor and then fed with gap spacing to the induction belt conveyor to be scanned by a barcode reader. The first package here receives a good scan, so the vertical sorter remains horizontal and passes it to the distribution conveyor on the backside. The next package, though, got a bad scan, so the vertical sorter routes it to the recirculation conveyor on the top level. The package stops at a rework station where the person can fix the problem, which in this case is to flip over the package to show the barcode. It's then released to get scanned again. The final stage of the process is to sort the packages to their destinations, and this occurs on the distribution conveyor using 3 electropneumatic diverters which sort the packages into 3 discharge chutes. Each diverter uses a different method common to sortation systems. To monitor and control the process, learners use the warehouse control software that runs on a touchscreen PC. The software features graphical screens to operate the system and has many other functions which are accessed from a main menu. Examples are system management, where the system is configured, and many order handling functions such as order picking, order tracking, order entry, order analysis, and there's also alarm screens and even a 3D monitoring and operation screen. And finally, students learn troubleshooting using Amatrol's Fault Pro, which is accessed from the HMI PC. In summary, SkillBoss has been carefully designed to provide a very realistic experience for learning a wide variety of skills in operation, maintenance, and troubleshooting of supply chain automation. So as you might expect, instructors have a lot to learn to teach and certify individuals in the CT-SCA certification and SkillBoss. And to make sure that's a success, we've actually created an instructor training course. And we actually held the very first one last week, and it went off with great success. And the instructors actually got certified. They learned how to do the hands-on skills and became familiar with the entire certification process and the online courses. And so that's what I've got to share about SkillBoss logistics today. And if you have any questions about SkillBoss, the CT-SCA certification, or the National Center, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us at the email addresses that you see here. And now I'd like to turn it back to Steve Harrington for summary remarks. Steve?
Thank you, Paul. Great presentation. Industry partners have told the National Center that the certification, ISO accreditation, and a standardized hands-on assessment, which in this case is SkillBoss Logistics, is a very attractive program to them because it removes the legal liability associated with self-testing and skill assessment bias. Hands-on skill assessments have always been a challenge with any type of technician skills verification system. Amatrol was able to solve this challenge in spades, and the center is thrilled with the outcome. At the core of our mission, NSF requires that the center seek industry input and develop resources to meet industry's workforce needs. This collaborative outcome is perfectly aligned with our mission. One noteworthy point: although the certification was developed to certify technician skills in support of the logistics industry, from a foundational skill set perspective, it addresses employer needs for entry-level techs in today's manufacturing operations. With this in mind, the center is now a partner in an NSF grant application with an advanced manufacturing mega center that includes 5 academic institution partners. We're hoping to receive funding news about this in the spring. At the conclusion of today's webinar, you'll receive a follow-up email from the National Center containing links to both the survey and the Introduction to Automated Warehousing e-textbook. NSF requires that we gather feedback from participants in our activities. This sort of feedback helps direct our future work and allows us to maintain our funding. If you have an interest in learning more about center resources, NSF funding opportunities, or the NSF Mentor Connect program, question 4 of the survey provides a field for you to enter your contact information for future center follow-up. For these reasons, I kindly ask that you take 2 minutes to complete the survey. Thank you so much. With that said, I'd like to turn the webinar back over to Ron to lead our Q&A session. Ron.
All right, thank you, Steve. And thank you, Rich, Steve, Neil, and Paul for your interesting presentations. We are going to the Q&A component of the webinar now. For those of you who are interested, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, so feel free to add your input. Let's go to the first question. And the first question, let's see here. We're going to direct this question to Steve. Steve, what are the ways in which schools and industry can implement the certification program?
Well, thank you, Ron. A great question. So I mentioned earlier that the center is doing pilot programs in varying states at varying schools across the country. One thing that's unique and interesting about the community college and technical school system is that it's in terms of the nature of the programs and their client base they hopefully serve, industry varies from region to region. That's meaning that the need to develop the existing programs that they have are tailored to meet that need. So in terms of the center's industry pilot, the center's pilots with the certification itself, varying schools are looking how do they integrate this into their existing program, what elements of the e-learning and how do they integrate the certification process into their existing, whether or not they need to add a couple additional courses. Some are looking at that, some are not. Others are looking at standalone certification programs, just a dedicated, a 6-month or 1-year program or that sort of thing. Some are looking at their dual enrollment and dual credit program partnerships with their high school partners in terms of a pathway in that direction. And others are looking at apprenticeship models. So the broader answer to the question is there are lots of ways to integrate this sort of program into your school. It just kind of varies based on the nature of the clients you serve and what the focus of your educational programs are.
Great, Steve. Thank you. Lots of options there. All right, the next question is going to be, let's see, we're going to shoot this one over to Neil. Neil, is this appropriate for high schools?
Absolutely. We're quite comfortable having looked at all 3 of these certifications with high school students, at least starting with equipment maintenance. We feel that's the least demanding of the 3. Each one of these is quite difficult, but there's no reason why in a senior year, possibly end of junior year, going into senior year, a high school student could not tackle equipment maintenance. Of course, it might need to be divided up into maybe 2 semesters just to get through all the content. But absolutely be fantastic for a pre-apprenticeship. It would be fantastic for a 2+2 program. It'd be great for a dual enrollment or dual credit program. And not to mention the reality of just getting, especially with the SkillBoss logistics device, getting high school students that might not otherwise have even thought of this career path, let alone earning the certifications. You're opening up a whole new world, a whole new industry sector for these high school students. So the answer is absolutely yes. Thanks.
All right, great. That's an interesting option for students that are interested in the high school in another technical career field. Okay, we have another question here. We're going to go back to Steve on this one. Steve, what is the starting wage for someone who earns these certifications?
So from an EM perspective or a beginning perspective, you complete the first 190 to 200 hours, earning you the EM certification, and that would qualify you for positions that are typically paid between $18 to $22 an hour. It's all based upon regional factors. In lower wage areas, which are lower cost of living, it may be a little lower than that, but I can certainly tell you in higher cost areas, like an example is New Jersey, entry-level techs with certification are earning somewhere $25 to $26 an hour. And then of course, there's a progression that I talked about earlier, moving up to level 2 and level 3 techs. A seasoned level 3 tech, all 3 certifications and say 3 years on the job, is making somewhere in $60,000 to $65,000 a year, maybe as much as $75,000 to $80,000 a year. So it's quite a lucrative and family supporting career pathway, and a job with opportunity to grow.
All right, that's fantastic. All right, let's go to, let's see, for this one, Paul, we're going to go to you for this one. Would the Skill Boss logistics device be appropriate for an existing automation program such as mechatronics or industrial maintenance that is focused on manufacturing?
Oh, thank you, Ron. That's a good question. So Skill Boss is really all about material handling automation, and material handling is not only being used in the world of supply chain, but it's also being used heavily in manufacturing. So manufacturers have conveyors and pick and place devices and lots of different components, and the technologies that go into Skill Boss are include sensors and controllers and devices that are used in all kinds of automation that are used in manufacturing. So the answer would be it would be a fantastic fit in any type of industrial maintenance or manufacturing program. And where I think it would enhance those programs is it would not only help teach the skills that might go into manufacturing, but then it would be an easy way to segue into the supply chain automation field. And a lot of the people that are going into supply chain automation right now are coming from the manufacturing world. The problem is there aren't enough of them right now. Thank you.
Okay, so back to you again, Paul. How many people can train on a Skills Boss logistic? What's the max in class per piece of equipment, would you say?
Okay. Well, one thing that's I think good about Skill Boss in the design is that it was made to be worked on from all 4 sides, and it's a pretty good sized device. It's about 8 feet long, so there's a lot of space to work on it with multiple people. So we believe that easily 2 to 3 students can work on it at the same time, and there's different activities that can be done in different places on the system. There also, I think as schools start to look at how they might fit it into a classroom, they may be thinking about, how many of these units do they need? It's conceivable that just one would be fine for a class of 12 to 14, 16 students, because there are also some other elements that are typically in the classroom. One, if they're using the online courses, they have the virtual trainers. So there's simulations of a lot of the activities that are being done on Skill Boss. And then also a lot of the activities that are being done on Skill Boss in the context of material handling are really fundamental skills that can be done on different types of training devices, like a pneumatic trainer or mechanical drives trainer. And so if a school has those types of devices in the classroom, they can leverage those as well. And that's how many schools, I think, would put a program together. If they're using Skill Boss solely as a device, then they definitely would need several of those if they were working with, say, a class of 16 students. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Paul. I think in the interest of time, we're just going to take one more question here. I'm going to direct this one to Neil. Neil, how do you envision high schools and youth connecting with the certification, or do you see this primarily as post-secondary?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I kind of already addressed the secondary space issue. I definitely think that there are multiple different areas and different layers in which you can integrate high school students. Another great way to get high school students on board would be through internship programs. So you have pre-apprenticeships, and I think we could build an apprenticeship fairly comfortably around this. But I think a pre-apprenticeship would also be of enormous value for high school kids, and doing the internships, especially a paid internship with an employer over the summer, would be of enormous value, and to get that student on board and hopefully earn a high school degree as well as the certification. So it just makes it that much more valuable for high school students. And I just, especially the wage, you're looking at equipment maintenance, you're looking about a high school student graduating from high school and starting at $18 to $20 an hour. I mean, that's pretty fantastic when you look at so many high school students like me who probably needed the money to pay their way through college or take loans and partially pay. But if you can get a job working for an employer, and not to mention tuition reimbursement. So not only could they get equipment maintenance, start working for an employer like a big OEM, like a Walmart or a Target or whatever, FedEx. And in many cases, they'll pay for them to continue their certifications onto the equipment repair and the network repair certifications. And gosh, they'd be almost at I hate to use the word master level, but if an individual's earned all three of these, once they get their appetite whet in high school, they can go on and then of course go on to AS degrees and engineering degrees. So this is really the beginning of their whole career path and was a very lucrative field.
Okay, so really appropriate for both high school and post-secondary. No.
Absolutely.
There. All right, well, I think that concludes our webinar for today. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.